All right, welcome back. So, you'll notice I've got this code up here that some of it will look familiar, some of it will look not. Um, Essentially, all I've done is I've taken the code that we left off on from the last video, and I've just kind of combined it with a copy of my Paint app. Um, Now, my Paint app may be a little more advanced, I'll say, than some of the ones I had you all do for the class. I've pared it down a little bit, but I was just kind of, when I was originally doing this, I kind of experimented a little. So if it behaves a little bit differently than yours, that's totally fine. What I'm going to show you is kind of irrelevant to that fact. So just as a refresher, everything from the last video is still here. I've got the all the sequencing stuff. In fact, I can label that. Music, stuff, paint, stuff. I've got that there. I've opened up function preload, but haven't put anything in it yet. I've got all this stuff in setup. Here is pretty much the same. I've just made the canvas a little bit bigger, and I've set the background inside of setup because this way we will be able to see all of our drawing that we do. That's just part of this Paint app project. I'm not going to go too much detail about what I did because we've already done the assignment. But I've got everything we did previously. I've set this back into background music instead of triggering it with the mouse, and I'll get into that later. But then inside of draw, now that's much bigger. Last time we pretty much didn't have anything inside of draw. But now this is just all of the stuff saying, hey, set the color, draw the stuff, do all that. I've got the function background music, which just starts the music when the code goes and it runs. And then all the stuff inside of function mouse press, which is just saying, hey, set the color. I've got function mouse released. I don't think I'm actually going to need that for this example. So that's what we've got in this code. I've basically just combined all of this together. I do want to, there's been an update since I did this, so this is going to bother me. So you all get to watch me add in a few equal signs. There we are. Save that. All right. There's just been an update in how some stuff works on the back end since I did the initial code. So the 3 equal signs works a little bit better than the 2. That's it. So that's just why I tweaked that going into there. Yeah, so that's basically it. If I run the code now, I'm going to put this back to 2. Didn't really make much of a difference, but I'm just going to do that. So if I run the code right now, just as it is, since I've now combined it all, and I have just said at the end of setup, we're going to run function background music, and all function background music does is starts the music. All right, that's all it does. So if I run this, we get this kind of pleasant background stuff. So as this music happens, we can draw. I think I defaulted this to starting at nothing. There we are, starting at black. My boxes disappear as I go. As I move closer, they show up. Change my colors. Throw in a little bit of that there. Some stuff like that. So we just have this kind of background stuff happening. But what I want to do is add in some combinations of different things that we have done. So to do that, I'm going to, if you remember from my very first video, first I'm going to stop this so I can talk better. So you remember from my first video of these 3, I mentioned I had a sound file here. So I'm just going to load that in to make it a little bit more interactive. So I'm just going to say click noise. So if you can guess what that is, you can type that in the comments now. But I'm going to go into function preload just as a reminder because we didn't really use it before. Preload is used for whenever you're loading in anything external that's not being generated by your code. So any images, any movies, any sound files, things like that. If you put it in preload, it will load all of that stuff up before your setup function starts. So that way your code isn't running while other things are still loading, and then you get errors because your code is trying to do something with a thing that doesn't exist yet. So that's why we didn't do it before, because all of the sound was being generated by our computer, by the Tone library and P5. So real quick, I'm just going to go into preload, and I'm going to say click noise. And that's going to get assigned the load image. This should be pretty familiar from stuff we were doing back in the graphics unit, particularly with bug squish and animating sprites. I'm just going to put in one thing here. So we're going to be load image, and inside of that image, I'm sorry, this is not an image, this is a sound file. Hi, this is a sound file. Sorry, this is a third video today. So I'm going to restart that. All right, so I'm just going to restart it all right. All right, hey everyone, welcome back. So this is going to be my last video for now. I may make more if people want me to go into more detail about stuff. This is kind of taking everything we've done so far, making a synthesizer that generates its own sounds and plays them back, giving it a sequence of notes to play, melodic stuff that you can dictate yourself as much as you want. And now we're going to be applying that to some codes. I'm going to specifically show you two different ways to do that, one being built off of the Paint app that we did a little while back in class, and one built off of the bug squish, which we did a little bit more recently in class. So what I have on the screen here is my P5 editor. If you remember from my first video, I added in a sound file here. I'll get to that in just a second. But essentially all I've done is combine this with my own version of the Paint app. Before I give the coding assignments, I usually go through and make my own versions of them. So this one may behave a little bit differently. I was just kind of playing around with a bunch of different possibilities. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, and that kind of resulted in the version you all got in class. But I'll kind of go through this briefly just as a refresher, just because I don't know when people are watching these. So I've combined what we had before. I still have some of the music stuff here with all of the melody sequence. I've added in, this is the Paint app stuff with setting the color. I'm actually going to make this a little taller. Let's make that 800. A little bit taller there, but that's all my default color, my array of colors to work with, things like that. Setup is almost exactly the same. The only I shouldn't say it's almost exactly the same. It starts off almost exactly the same. I've just moved the background into setup and set it to completely white. This way it'll set our background initially, and then we can draw on top of it, and it won't get covered up by the results of the draw function. As you just saw me do, I made this just a hair taller from what I had it defaulted to. Underneath that, we have all the stuff we did previously, so you can change the sounds that you're making if you want. I've brought back the background music function, and I've deleted the stuff at the very bottom with that. So now our sequence will just start automatically whenever we run the code. It's going to be our background music. You can tell my very clever naming scheme there. And that's just going to be existing in the background while you do these things. All right. So inside of the draw function, you'll notice that before, the draw function was essentially empty. There was nothing. And this is where most of the stuff from the Paint app that I made goes in. I noticed a typo. I'm just going to fix instead of BOSEX, it's going to be boxes in my comment there. All right. You find errors all the time in coding, so you fix them when you can. All right, that doesn't change how any of this will function, but essentially it's going to be just like our Paint app where we have some boxes of different colors. You click on them, and then you can click and drag inside of the canvas and draw some stuff. I think the main difference between this version and the one you all did is that I set it up so that when my mouse moves away from the boxes, they disappear, and then when it gets closer, they come back, just so you can, see the whole canvas, and that's there. All right, so that's pretty much that. Like I said, we've got the background music right here. All that does is start it, and then everything inside of mouse press now is just drawing the lines. So I've got that set up there. I'm sorry, this is, drawing the lines, drawing the boxes, all that stuff. So we have all of that set up. So if I run the code, we should be able to hear everything happening. You notice my stuff went away as I move my mouse over here. It defaults to black. So then if I go back, find my colors, I'll make it this weird brown color so we can tell the difference. And some green over here. I'm actually going to make this a little bit of a thicker line just so we can see it. Come on, there we are. And that didn't really do much. All right, anyways. That's regardless. So anyway, we have all of this happening here. You'll notice we have the background music just going on. That's fine for now. But it's a little boring after a bit. So what I'm going to do is add in some stuff to make this a little bit more interactive. All right? So I've already added in this variable here called click noise. If you pause the video and put in the comments what you think it's going to do. All right, so I'm going to go into preload, and this is where this is all going to happen. But before I go into preload, I'm going to pause this because that's going to get on my nerves while I'm talking. All right, so what preload does, just as a refresher, is it loads in everything that is not being generated by your code, all the external resources you might have. It's going to load them in and set them up before your code starts running. This is to prevent, say if you had an image and wanted to set it up, do something with it in setup, this will prevent your setup function from running until that image is ready to go. Because otherwise, as far as the computer is concerned, it's going to be trying to build something with an object that does not exist. So anytime you have an external file that's not being generated by your code, you want to set it up in function preload. All right. So I'm going to say click noise, name of our variable. That's going to get assigned, since it's a sound file, I'm just going to do a tone, capital T, tone.player. And we have that there. And then that will go to master. So now we can hear that. So we have tone.player. So now inside of the tone.player object, since we're only loading in one sound file, that's what player does. There's other ones where you can load in multiple sound files, but for this example, we're just doing one sound file. We just have to tell it where to find the sound file. In this case, I had the click.mp3 downloaded onto my computer, and I just uploaded it into P5. That's very simple to do. You just go to your sketch files. You click on this little thing. You can have your create folder, create file. I created a folder and then went to that sound files and uploaded a file there. So now it's inside of this folder. So now I can, if I had multiple sound files, I could just keep them all in one place. So now I can just say, as a string, I can just say folder sound underscore files. And then we just get slash click.mp3. And that's what we have there. So now we've made this happen. We've loaded this into the player, and we're referring to that as click noise. So since it's going to be the click noise, what I'm wanting this to do is play the sound file every time I click the mouse, which in this context is going to be whenever I start drawing or I change a sound. So if I go down to mouse pressed, which starts here, I can start off by Actually, I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I'm going to say I want this to happen only when I click on the stuff to change the sound. So I'm going to build another if. Let's see. So mouse press. So if I'm going to say this is going to look a little bit like the other ones, but a lot smaller. If mouse X is less than, let's see, for proportion reasons, I made these weirdly shaped boxes. They're just under 60 pixels. So if it's, we'll say if it's less than 57, then I'm going to say click noise dot start. We have that there. So now if anytime I click inside of that 57 bit, which is kind of the boundary for my boxes, because they're just under 60, that was just something I kind of arbitrarily picked when I made the original code. So now we'll hear this anytime this function runs, which will be whenever the mouse is pressed. And then it's going to say if the mouse X is less than 57, then it's going to run the click noise regardless. And then it's going to run all this other stuff to set the values. So what should happen is if I run this, I get an error because I mistyped something. Oh, it is a new Tone.player. All right, forgot that. That's why we get the errors. Whenever you get the error, it's always great to see where that error is happening, because without knowing where it is, they're not always super helpful in what it is that is the problem. So that'll tell you where it is and you can hopefully find it. This one was actually pretty helpful. It needs to be called with the new keyword. So I just had to go in and type in new when I made the new tone player. All right, so now we get our sound happening. I'm going to move my mouse over here, and I'm going to click and draw. Nothing happens. And so we should get, as I move over here inside the boxes, we're going to get a kind of annoying beep noise, but that's just kind of what I had. And no, we don't. All right, this is working. Is that not? That should be what it is. All right, gonna go and do some checking and editing real quick. Squish sound dot start. Squish sound dot start. All right, I am back. We are had some little difficulties there. I'll edit that out with a funny graphic. As I was just saying, with errors and not being helpful, we was getting one. If you saw the saying that the click noise.start was not a function. Well, that was not at all what the problem was. The real problem was if you go back and go to when I was typing in the new tone.player stuff, I forgot the parentheses after my .toMaster. That was what was causing this issue. So, chalk went up for unhelpful bits. So if I run this code now, we get our little background music. I'll draw some stuff, squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. And as I go back over here and I click in this area, and now it makes that little click noise. So I have that happening there. One thing is the way I made the test, if I click down here, still get the noise, but we get the idea. You could just go in and say if it's, if mouse X is less than 57 and less than 5, mouse Y is less than 570, you can map it to the boundaries of this little square bit. So we have that happening there. All right. And you can be quiet. So that's one way you can kind of combine in this background music that's happening with these sound effects. Because these are kind of two different things we're using the tone library for. They don't fight with each other as long as everything's formatted properly, which, as we have found out, happens all the time, even when you don't expect it to. All right, so that's kind of a refresher on adding in sounds, and just like everything we've done in the sampler project with loading in sounds and applying effects to them, you can do that right in here in your project with the loading in these sounds, and you can adjust all of the parameters that we've gone over with the synthesizers so far in this project. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of one more little thing, and that is going into and how to make different kind of sequences, different sounds happening within the same project. All right. So this is going into some of the bug squish stuff. If anyone is doing this kind of as an assignment for their kind of end of the semester credit, we can go in and you can do it either way. But if you do it on the bug squish, I'm expecting it a little bit more this way. I'll talk a little bit more about the details for each one. But if I pull open this is my version of bug squish with sound. All right. So I made this a little while ago. So basically, this is bug squish, everything you need to know. I've got what's different between what we've done before is I have 3 different sequences here. I've got the starting, playing, and ending sound sequences. I've set my timer to be 45 seconds, and I've set my bugs to move at 2 speed. You can adjust all that stuff just as a refresher. That's just all that stuff depends on what you do later on. All right. So as I move down into preload, I've just, like I said, I've got all of my images here, and then I've added in a sound effect for whenever my bugs get squished, just like I did previously in the Paint app, and added in a sound effect for whenever I clicked on the new squares. Now it's going to be a squish sound whenever I click a bug. All right. This is just loading in all the stuff. In setup, this is just making all the bugs, making the group thing. This is making all the bugs, making all the group things. We have that happening in setup. But what you'll notice is as we get down here, I've got the synthesizers happening. I've got some slightly different synthesizer stuff than what we've done before. It's the same kind of thing. I'm just using a different synthesizer. It's just like this other one, only it does some more stuff that we won't have time to get to in this class with everything going on. If you really want to know about amplitude modulation, you can send me a message or leave a comment, and I'll talk about amplitude modulation in class. So we'll go from there. But basically, it's just some synthesizer. It does some stuff, but I've got 3 of them happening. So if I scroll down, this makes my setup function huge. But then there's synth 2. Scroll down a bit. Actually, no, I've got 2 of them, and it changes. I've got 2 of them, not 3, and it just changes it. So I've got 2 different sounds going on, and I'll just change what's happening. The part underneath that is where I've got the adding in those sequence of notes. So I've got that happening there. I've set the tempo, and I've started all the stuff. I've told it to loop in the background. All of that should not be new, especially if you watched all these videos relatively close to each other. It's all right there. Down here inside of function make bugs, just for fun, I'm going to play that squish sound right at the start every time we make bugs. And then underneath that, it's just making all of the bugs here, giving them the animation, setting the rotation stuff, telling them where to appear, saying you're not going to be squished. When you click on it, do this stuff. So what it's going to do is, if I click on the bug, it's going to make it be the squished animation. It's going to make it so it doesn't move. And if I haven't squished it yet, it's going to reduce the amount of bugs I have left, increase my score. It's going to go away after 1,000 frames, and then it's going to play that squish sound. So compared to before, I'm getting a little more in-depth in the triggers for this sound playback. So you can set it to be whatever you want it to be. You just kind of have to think about where you want these sounds to occur and what those triggers would be. So in the Paint app, if you want these 3 sounds to happen whenever you do X, Y, and Z, you have to tell it to say, all right, well, whenever this happens in my code, I also need to add in this, in this case, squish sound dot start to that part of the code. So you can just kind of experiment and see what's going on. What I want to point out, though, is when we get down into draw. So this one we just made all the bugs. Yeah. That's a big chunk of the code there. In this project, kind of one of the main parts outside of applying what we've learned for sprites and animation is talking about game states or play states, just different states that in this case, game or whatever program you're writing exists in. It's kind of like saying I'm going to be, here doing this kind of thing, and then I'm going to move over here and go over here. It's one way to think about it would be kind of like a tadpole or a caterpillar. They start off in one state, they move to another, and then they go on to their third states. Larva, pupa, adult, things like that. In games, you could have them go, jump in different orders, move back and forth. Just depends on how complex of a game with different states you want. For this example, it was just 3 different states, and it moved boom, boom, boom. Start, play, stop. That's what we have there. What you'll notice is I have pulled up and on the screen right here the start sequence. And I've got it just like normal, just saying, here's the background, here's the instructions. If mouse is pressed, we're going to call this function I made called cue play. And what these are done, I've made a few functions, and it's going to essentially just cue or start the sound for the next sound for the next play state. So it's going to cue the play state sound. One thing I did gloss over is if I go back to setup, it's in here somewhere. Start signal, there we are. I've made one for the starting state as well, but since setup, it'll just start up automatically. I just put it right there in setup. So that's the first one. And that's going to play all while game state is equal to start. And then the very last thing in that thing is going to stop. It's going to cue the play, and then that's going to happen during that and during the play state. And then at the very end, we get to cue the end state sound, which again, just like the other one, when we get down to it, is going to cue the music that's happening in the end state. That does all of its stuff. And then at the very end, if you restart the game, it's going to stop the ending sequence, and it's going to run setup again, which is going to remake all the bugs, reset all the scores, and then at the very end, restart that starting sound. So that's what's happening there. If I scroll down, we get, we're showing the sprites, we're moving the bugs around. This is, mine's a little more complex in terms of making different various numbers of bugs. That's the timer, and then here we are. All right, so we have these two functions at the end, the QPlay and QEnd. And essentially, all they're going to do is stop the sound from the previous section. So in QPlay, it's going to stop the start sequence. Little confusing. It's going to stop the first sound. It's going to start the second sound, and it's going to turn on the loop. So it's going to loop this sound just continuously over and over again. And that's all it's going to do. Because at the very end of that play sequence, we call QEnd. And what that's going to do is it's going to stop the stuff. It's going to set this tempo value here. Because I adjusted the tempo previously. I'm going to get into that in a second. And then it's going to start the last sequence and then make sure that one is looping as well. So it stops everything from here. It's going to make these adjustments. Now, the reason I have this beats per minute value changing is because I did a little bit of a fun thing. If I scroll back up to if game state equals play, there we are, is I have this is one big else if statement with other ifs inside of it to kind of build in more complex tests for, okay, so we have, we're in the play state, but only when we're in the play state, we're going to check for X, Y, and Z. So in this case, it's inside of the play state. We're going to display this stuff, and we're going to check and say if we have the total time minus the time. That's essentially saying if there's less 10 seconds or less left in your timer, it's going to increase the tempo to 180. So it's just going to make the music speed up, get faster, be like, oh, you're running out of time, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to bring that up. So what does this all mean? Compared to before, it's a little more simple than it looks, because I know this is a much bigger code than some things I've been showing previously. Pretty much stuff we did in the first and second videos, we done here, I did here. I didn't type it all out because it would have been redundant, but you're just doing this and repeating it multiple times. So we have different synths, different synthesizers to create different timbres, different melody arrays to play different notes into those synthesizers. We have the different play states here, which are kind of dictating when the specific ones get played. And that's all done in setup. Just saying, hey, play this sequence or play that one, load this one into that. So that's just like we did in the first and second videos in this sequence. I've loaded in a sound just like I did at the beginning of this video, and that's being played by triggering whenever I click on a bug. Again, just like I've done before, it's just slightly more complex and slightly more interactive. This really all comes together when you experience it. So I'm going to play through this game real quick for 45 seconds, and we'll hear this. This is some different melodies. I just kind of threw these together pretty quick. We get them happening there. So if I run this, we'll start here. I'm going to stop talking in just a second, but I'm going to run this, and I'm going to, you'll be able to hear all three of the sounds. Actually, I think I'm going to do it twice, once without me talking, once with me talking, to kind of illustrate the different sounds. And then I'm going to wrap this video up just by talking about what to expect if you want to do some of this end of semester extra credit / optional assignment. All right, so I'm going to start off. I'm just going to make this a little smaller. If I can, there we go. All right, so if I run that. I am going to turn the volume up just a little. Alright, so I just turned that down on my headphones, but I also turned it down in the video. So I'm going to play this one more time just so you can see. Again, this might be slightly different than your particular bug squish assignment, but the idea is the same. So I'm going to play through it and just kind of narrate what's happening a bit. You'll notice that all of the background sounds are looping, which is totally fine. But I'm going to click on this again just to restart it. Oh, I'm not hearing stuff. I'm just going to restart the code just to start it. That's a bug I got to fix. No pun intended. Actually, I may have just turned down my headphones too much. So I'm going to run this again. There we are. So again, this is just that opening melody happening again and again. It's just the very end of that setup function where I say, hey, play the start sequence, which I've loaded into a sequence happening after my synthesizers. Start sequence equals new, blah, 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 blah. And then the play sequence has the same synthesizer, now that I'm actually going through this in detail. And you'll notice the ending one sounds different because it's in a different synthesizer. But then we get that start sequence dot start. So just like the normal assignment, if I click it, we're going to move into the next bit. So now the melody has changed, but it's the same synthesizer. And you'll notice as I click the bugs, a little click noise happens. And that's happening. They'll eventually go away. I'm going to stop clicking for now because in about 8 seconds you'll notice that tempo spike up. The sequence and timbre are exactly the same. It's just instead of happening at 80 beats per minute, it's going to happen now at 180 beats per minute. So it's picking up faster and faster. 2, 1, and now the game is over. So now you notice the timbre is different because I loaded it into that second synthesizer, which I have on screen right there on line 106. And it's just going to play this and it's going to loop until I click to play again. There we are. Now it goes right back to the play. And it's playing that again. If I were to keep going, it would go bit by bit and speed up, but I'm not going to go through that because we've already heard it twice. So that's different ways you can kind of apply this in tandem with recorded sounds, which we've already done, into different projects. And this was actually going to be a in-class assignment to kind of combine these things into either your Paint app or your Bug Squish. So that brings me to kind of the wrap-up of this little series of 3 videos. And what I'm going to say is for the assignment, it's completely optional for the rest of the year, but if you do it, you'll get, and it's all done properly, you'll get some extra credit. So what you're going to have to do is in either your Paint app or your Bug Squish, your choice, is you're going to have to add in at least 3 different sounds to each of them. All right, so you have to create your own. All right, so that being said, you cannot go into these codes that you're seeing online and copy my melodies. That you won't get any credit at all for doing that. You have to come up with your own. You can experiment around, but they have to be largely different. I'll actually be checking that, and if they're pretty much the same thing, then I'm going to say try again. So you have to do that. You have to have, I say 3 different sounds. Total, it's going to be a combination of the synthesizer stuff that we do and the pre-recorded sounds. So if you want to have, like I've done in both of these codes, have a single pre-recorded sound, that's fine. That can count for one of your sound effects. You just have to trigger it so that it works properly, like I've done in this code, and in not quite as much, but also in this code, so when I'm clicking in certain areas, sounds pop up. If you do it in Bug Squish, the logical one is to have it happen when you squish the bugs. If you do it in the Paint app, it makes sense to happen when you click on the squares to change the colors. Speaking of Paint app, I'm going to go through where they're different now. In the Paint app, what you can do is have the background music like I did. But what I didn't do is add in an additional sound. So essentially, you have to add in a play state for this, which is essentially when your mouse is clicked, but not where your squares are, to then play back a second synthesizer bit. So it's instead of the background music, you're now getting the drawing music. It's just a different sound to happen while you're interacting with this code. If people are having trouble with this and want some help, I can make another video later on kind of detailing some of how that works. I don't want to just give it away. But I think between all three of the videos I've done, since you can rewatch these as many times as you want and pause them, there should be enough between this code and the bug squish code to kind of figure out how to get all of that together. I believe in you. All right. So anyway, so for Paint app, for both of these, you can have one pre-recorded sound that you can trigger in some way, but then you want to have at least two other sounds. For Paint app, it's just background music and drawing music, because there's not really a game over state. There's different states where you can apply different transitions. It just kind of makes sense. You're either drawing or you're not. So that's that. In the bug squish, you essentially would set it up just how I set it up. You don't have to have three of them. You can if you want. I'm only going to be grading on 3 sounds, and one of them can be a pre-recorded bit like when you click on the bug, or you can have 3 different background sounds. So you could have the first one be the starting screen and the playing screen, and then a game over screen. Just as an example, again, you want to have I'm going to keep reiterating this. You have a total of 3 sounds. One of them can be pre-recorded that you trigger in some way, and then the other 2 are synthesizer-based sounds. You have to have at least 2 of them that you write your own melody for. They can't be the ones that I've been having on the screen all the time. You have to do that, and then they have to change in some interactive, intuitive way. They can't just randomly switch at some point. So that might be a little bit more in-depth than some of the projects we've done. But again, this is kind of you can take up to several weeks to really fine-tune this. So again, the last video in this little series. I'm going to kind of edit all these up, make them moderately pretty. My iMovie skills are not great. But I'll do that. I'll post them all on the YouTube and give you all these links on Monday. You can see I'm doing this on Friday the 24th. So over the weekend, I will edit up at least 2 of them, get this 3rd one out before Wednesday, depending on my time, because I'm also in class. And we'll go from there. You can then work on it at your leisure. Between now and May 20th is the last day that I can accept grades, because then the school will say you can't accept grades anymore and lock me out of the grade book. So that'll be there. I'm just trying to think of literally anything else. Again, it's optional, but you should be able to check your grade, and if you think it could be higher or want it to be higher or just need something to do, definitely turn this in. I'll have office hours via the Google Classroom. All right, remember the Google Classroom. I'm not a EBR employee, so I can't get into some of the Microsoft Teams things that they're doing. So it'll be through the Google Classroom on Monday and Wednesday. This will be slightly different than what the school put out, because they put out a schedule when I'm in another class for LSU, so I cannot do that. They never asked me, so tough titties. It's going to be Monday and Wednesday from 9 to 10:30. I'll be in the Google Classroom. There'll be a video meeting open. You can just click right on that and join in. I'll have it for both of my classes at the same time. You can come in if you want any time in that time block, and I will be there to answer questions, show some code stuff as much as I can. I'm still working out the details, but I'll be able to answer as much as I can doing things that way. Do that there. I'll also have some time on Friday between 10:30 and 11:30. So again, that's Monday and Wednesday between 9 and 10:30. I will be in the Google Classroom. I'll have a video meeting open, so you can just access it right there. Just log in. You're already in the Google Classroom. So you can do that. And then on Friday, the same thing between 10:30 and 11:30. Other than that, you can message me anytime in Remind, and I'll have that there. I'll be able to answer as soon as possible. I'm generally available and flexible, but again, I just have other stuff that I gotta get done and finish up because the LSU semester is ending as well. So there's just everything to get done. So with that, I will leave you all and say stay safe. Have a great summer, great end of the year, all that fun stuff. And I will hopefully see you all in the class meeting. Bye.